Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's Rob Beach and from Beach's Motorcycle Adventures coming to you one more time for one of our Beach's audio adventures. Still doing one of the great things that motorcycling brings to us, which is having the opportunity to meet, talk to, and learn from all sorts of neat people. And our neat list starts with Mike Knott from Thunder Bay, Ontario. Hi, Mike. How's it going up there in the Great White North?
Yeah, it's not too bad up here. I'm just sitting here enjoying, I poured myself a Loon vodka. So Loon vodka is made in Hearst, Ontario. It's 600 kilometers from here. So Loon vodka and a Pear Tree smoky ginger ale. Thought I'd just sit here and enjoy this while we talk to Jane Schluter. I'm looking forward to talk to Jane. I met Jane one time at an RA rally at the front gate, kind of roughly. We talked just for a few minutes. So she probably, I look on her face, like, I don't remember that.
I don't. I'm so sorry.
Fair enough. One of hundreds of people.
Thousands,
you're not
probably.
the first woman to forget me, Jane, but
Definitely not on purpose.
welcome aboard, Jane.
Thank you very much, Mike. Terrific.
So what brings you to our fine podcast today?
Well, Gretchen reached out and asked me if I'd come and talk with you guys. Thanks.
And here you are.
And here I am, right?
It was a tough sell, ladies and gentlemen. It really was. Motorbikes? People, I'd be happy to talk about motorbikes and people. Yeah.
I have to say, I also interviewed Rob, and he was really fun to talk to. So it was not a hard sell now.
Yeah, the tables are turned.
Interesting. Yeah. I guess I spoke to both Rob and Gretchen there, and it was fun.
And where are you sitting right now, Jane?
I am in Haworth, New Jersey, and for most people, even those next to me, literally in the town next door, they don't know where Haworth is. It's a very small town. It's about 3 square miles, maybe, and there's 2 golf courses. It's about 12 miles northwest of New York City.
So you've been riding motorcycles for quite a while, Jane, haven't you?
Yeah, I have. I always wanted to ride, but my parents weren't cool, and they sure did not want me to have a bike. But I used to take my little red Schwinn bicycle. I didn't know that there were actually kid motorcycles in those days. I would take that and go ride in the woods and pretend I was on a motorbike. And
really?
So that was my little, I don't know. I just wanted a motorcycle. I tried everything. I said, I'm going to save up money. I saved up money because they said, oh, yeah, okay. I don't think they thought I could save up the money. My first experience was in 1996 in Italy. So I had to actually leave the country to get a bike, to get on a bike, to learn to ride. That was a lot of fun, definitely good experience. I have to say I'm better equipped driving wise, having learned in Italy than maybe some other places where you don't have to think as fast on your feet. It was in Rome. And I learned on a 1968 Vespa, which I still have. And now I also have a 2003 R1150 GS. It's blue and white. And then a 2017 R1200 Rally. So those I take out riding. And during this time, it's been great. Some people who don't have bikes, Jane, hey, let's go out riding. Let's go out riding.
Very
the
good.
Vespa, unfortunately, is not working right now, but it will be very soon, hopefully.
I think you had just got that rally when I met you.
Oh, right.
Funny, when I just saw you, I thought, oh yeah, I met you before. I never forget a pretty face.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And I have to say there are a lot less women riding than men probably too.
Yeah, right? You're probably correct with that.
Although in Europe, they seem to certainly be picking up more female riders quicker than I'm seeing here.
For sure. Especially because in Europe, it's not just a luxury travel kind of fun hobby. In Europe, it's a mode of transportation for work. So
for sure, yeah, and a really good option too. Not just, hey, I'm going to get a bike and I can ride to work. It's no, in a lot of those cities, I'm way better off to ride my scooter, my motorcycle, or whatever.
You can't in Rome. Literally, there's no parking. The traffic's so bad, you don't have another option. For example, I mean, and if it rains, heaven forbid, oh my gosh, you'd be sitting in traffic for hours and hours and hours. And I live near New York City. And I'd rather sit in New York City traffic.
Yeah.
That
Yes.
says a lot. That says a lot.
Yeah, I
So,
completely agree.
and you are a lot more free to ride, though, lane splitting, etc., right down smack on the yellow double line. I mean, you could pretty much do anything you want almost on a motorcycle as far as getting around traffic,
Yeah, for
unlike
sure.
maybe the United States.
And your experience with that leads you to think that that is advantageous or dangerous, or of course, when we are dealing, Mike and I, with Americans who are in Europe for the first time, who aren't from California and are not familiar with lane splitting, it's something that really results often in quite a bit of concern, quite a bit of fear, quite a bit of anxiety, and then great big eyes when they discover how wonderful it actually is to split lanes in traffic where people are expecting it.
Well, that's the thing. It does go far that in Europe, people expect it. They expect you to try to pass them on a motorcycle, or a moped or whatever, frankly. They expect that. So they're also expecting that each person's going to try to get ahead of the other. They know how everybody's driving. Everybody drives the same way. I remember I was in South Africa and I was trying, and they lane split there too. I was on a motorcycle and I had a Canadian and an American with me. And I guess where this guy was from in Canada, they didn't have to lane split. So when me and the other American went lane splitting, he was sort of left behind because he just not in his wheelhouse. But he caught up. He caught up. But I guess I didn't even think about it. You know, you have a lot more open roads up there in Canada than here. Well, actually,
Yeah,
I guess some places the Midwest, but not around New York City.
for sure. Yeah, there's lots. We don't have a ton of people, of course, here, and lots of open spaces. So for the majority of them, well, first of all, it's not legal anywhere. They're starting to talk about it in the Toronto area, that maybe we should start doing that, because some of those areas are getting congested now, and it's a really good option because you can only build so many roads. And so it's a really good option if you can encourage X amount of people to get out of there. If they can filter through and get along their way, okay, you've just eliminated whatever 20% of the congestion out there. Boom, right away. So, but baby steps, slowly baby steps. It's a bunch more states. I think they're talking about it, or they've passed a little bit of legislation, I guess.
I'd like to point out that we've got Mr. Mike Knott here suggesting that there is some possibility for logical conclusions and possibilities from politicians. That was just suggested by Mike. You can see the bubble he's living in Canada. I'm sorry to interrupt, Jane, but carry on.
I guess it's a Canadian perspective, I guess. So sometimes every so often we get lucky and solve a problem. Not all the time, certainly. So it's, speaking of riding all over these different places in these times, people are looking for fun things to do. That's one of the few things we can still do. And it has a lot of great benefits, doesn't it?
It does. And I have to say, it's really funny because you don't have to take your helmet off now. You can just walk in the store with the helmet on. I was joking with my friends. We were trying to figure out when it was first here, and New York City was sort of the epicenter for a while. So we had to really be on lockdown, and it definitely caused a little bit of claustrophobia. So we were all joking, okay, let's social distance on the motorcycle. And you can. It sort of goes hand in hand, you know? We met up and we did some rides together. The gas is cheap. I was sort of scared to go over the state lines for a little bit because they were talking about no state lines. But as things got a little looser, that was a unique, got over the state line today. Big progress. And here's someone who's traveling so much, and I'm talking internationally. And now I'm really just happy I got over the state line, which frankly is a few miles from my house.
Yeah. Are you finding when you stop for gasoline or any place that you have any issues going in with your helmet on? Because certainly that before COVID was a pretty big deal to go into a store, for instance, with the helmet on. And it still is in Europe. You just don't do it. You don't walk into a bank. You don't walk into a gas station with your helmet on. At least a full face.
Well, I know, and some people, I think I think it's illegal because I guess you can like use it as a robbing the bank mechanism, whatever. But No, I didn't have any problems at all with that, actually. Interesting. I just had fun with it. And people were like, oh, that's, they got some smiles. They're like, that's a new take on the mask, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You didn't have to open up your tank, whatever, and put your helmet in or put it on the handlebars and worry about it. So it was helpful.
Like you're saying, Jane, just it's one of the few probably group things we can do is still respect the social distancing guidelines, recommendations they're giving us. That you could be hanging out with 10 of your friends and out riding and everything's good. You're still pay attention to those recommendations.
I guess I was a little hesitant at first because they really were trying to keep everybody in the house here in New Jersey. I mean, as I said, I'm about 12 miles from New York City, but I started seeing more and more motorcycles and I said, you know what? I think that's fine. It wasn't a problem. It was a lot of fun, actually. I got more and more people riding. And then I went a little farther and a little farther. The biggest problem I have to say that I've had in my trips is finding a bathroom.
Yeah.
Because a lot of them are not open. You can get gas, but you can't use the bathroom.
Yeah, because we've been hearing that a while back about the truckers coming across. There's no bathrooms and stuff for them to use. And then it was a lot of the places were opening up for truckers because they have a need. They have to use these facilities. And if you want your broccoli and beer, you need a truck to show up, but they're only opening up for the truckers. So like you said, if you're out for a drive somewhere and you need to go, a lot of them, there's just no facilities.
Well, folks, there's tip number 1 for traveling under COVID lockdown. Learn to use the woods. You'll discover, you really and truly will discover that is something that is so liberating, because it then allows you to do things like not be stuck on the main roads with the McDonald's and the Burger Kings. That's really, really amazing how much pressure there can be to rider and passenger when bladder is under pressure.
And probably with that said, tour operator, because then you have a whole bunch of people thinking, I need a restroom.
I have great luck, and I know that Mike does too, with our ladies. Gretchen is one who would far rather take a walk into the woods than walk into most of the public restrooms anywhere in the world. And so that's great for me, because it's not a question of doing anything other than finding some place that is reasonably secure and a bit private, rather than, the place that's got the loo.
But that's another thing that's so much more kind of acceptable or expected in Europe. There's lots of times you stop at a little pull off. If you kind of go in behind the bushes there, you see the unofficial rest stop. I think a lot of times, because areas we are riding in, there's mountains and there's streams and there's back roads, but there's not a McDonald's, there's no Tim Hortons, there's nothing like that. So if you're going to wait for the next restroom, it could be 100 kilometers of mountain passes before you find it. So what are you going to do? Well, either you hold it or you go in behind the rock, and It's so much more acceptable, it seems, there.
Well, I have to say too, if you're a rider who rides quite a bit, chances are that you've had to do that anyway, right? If you haven't just been riding on the main streets. I mean, that's what I use my motorcycle for, is to find new back passages when I'm just for a local ride kind of thing.
I don't know how we got so far deep into
bathroom. We're talking about bathroom.
Well, these things never go the direction we expect them to, do they?
But
no.
I was traveling one time up near Hearst, where that vodka came from years and years ago. There's the Highway 11 that goes up there. There's 200 kilometers of nothing but moose, trees, and a lonely highway. And there's absolutely nothing for 200 kilometers. Well, I had to go partway through there. And so I had my buddy pull over, and I went in the bush. Probably the fastest I ever went, because the other thing that we had a lot of is mosquitoes. So I was like,
yeah.
Okay, this has to happen now. And compare that to years ago, we were traveling in Florida. A friend of mine really had to go, and we weren't finding anything. We were half lost. We didn't know where we were. So he told me I had to pull over right away. Pull over, and he went traipsing off into the grass, and I reminded him that we were in the land of the alligator or crocodile, whatever the heck, some scary monster that could kill him.
And then could
Farmer.
run pretty fast.
Yeah, he turned around and looked at me, and I don't care. I got to go. It's amazing how even the threat of death won't hold that off.
I know.
No,
That's pressure.
might bring it on faster.
You've been involved in the motorcycle industry for a long, long time, in addition to riding. Tell us a bit about that.
You know, it's been a really exciting, interesting, literally ride. When I turned 30, someone's like, Jane, you should be in the motorcycle business because you like motorcycles so much. It just happened. I met some guy in the elevator. He was on a phone call and he literally stopped. Oh, do you ride? And I have my helmet in my hand, which I'm in the process of putting on my head because I was late for actually a meeting. And I said, yes, but so many people, as a woman, a lot of people assume that I might be a passenger. And so I said, so I think he was clarifying that. And that was a really fun introduction to the motorcycle because to BMW motorcycles, at least, because he was looking for a woman for the BMW motorcycle team. And he had a very difficult time finding a woman, I guess, for the team. And here I just literally walk into the elevator with a helmet in my hand. So it was cool. We talked. I drove him on my bike. It was not a BMW at the time. To his meeting. I was late for mine, but that's okay because a few months later I was down, I forget where I was, but we were riding the bike and they were really massive. I have to say, I had not had the experience that most people had on these bikes. And there were a lot of former highway patrolmen that were motorcycle riders now on this demo team with me. And my boss said, nope, you're going to ride that bike. He had his eye on the bike, the off-road one, the GS. He said, this is the bike that you're going to be riding. I said, no. I'm a cruiser girl. And now saying that, I can't imagine, I mean, ever going back on a cruiser, not because it's a bad bike. It's just not for me. And so literally he made me ride that bike. I stalled it like 50 times. I felt like because it was just so different with the throttle and the clutch from my bike, but it was fun. And so it was a great experience on the demo team, which led to BMW of Manhattan. That was funny because someone wanted to work both on the demo team and a dealership, and suddenly I was roped into that too, which was fine. And then I worked at corporate. 8 years later, I was the USGS ambassador for BMW in 2010. You know, I called my former boss up and I said, hey, guess what? You knew it all along. I guess you did. And that was very cool because they literally paid me to ride the AMA Enduro circuit on my 1200 GS. All these people have been riding their whole lives. I had just decided when I bought my 1150 GS in 2003 that I was going to just have fun and see what it would do off-road. But that is very different when you're going on these AMA circuits. And I had started riding with a couple guys, which I didn't know at the time, but one was second in enduro riding and the other one, they both had been ranked even as kids. And I just followed them and prayed a lot. I prayed all the time, I have to say. And I somehow I just followed their line. I got up mountains. I did things that I don't know how I did to this day. And there's one hill right after lunch one time, and I'm watching all these little smaller motorcycles, like the dirt bikes, falling down. They're literally just rolling down in front of me. And I said, you know what? You just have to gun it, lean forward and go, stand up and go. And I made it up that thing. And I said, oh my gosh, I was terrified because their bike weighs maybe 200 pounds. My bike weighed almost 600.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
and that rolling down the mountain would be a lot different story than a little 200 something bike with me on it. But so it was a lot of fun. It was stressful, scary. I don't know. It was a really exciting time. And, so that was really cool. And the people that I meet in the motorcycle community, I have to admit, that was the thing that it was amazing. I love meeting people, and they're diverse people from everywhere in the world and all walks of life, all nationalities, and just the most grounded people. At least my experience has been. And it doesn't matter where you are. You can find a friend and a motorcycle person across the world. And that was just, it was cool. Once I discovered here, I said, oh, I'm going to go ride other places. And I've ridden some other places around the world. It's been really cool. It's really a cool, fun ride. And my different jobs sort of transitioned into another job. I helped roll out the 1600 for BMW, the GT and GTL, a lot less riding. But it was cool. And then my most recent experience was with sort of Riders Association for BMW. So I got to see it from another angle, and where I got to meet Mike. Right? And
exactly.
actually, to be fair, also I met Rob there too, because
Well, that's
I
okay
wanted
too,
to.
I guess.
I interviewed him for the magazine. We had a nice big article on Beach's motorcycle tours, right?
Indeed.
Motorcycle
Indeed. It was a good
adventures.
one. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Yeah, meet cool people.
Do you think maybe partly you really enjoy this because people get it or get you, as opposed to someone who's not involved in an industry? They might be surprised that you, like you said, are driving the motorcycle, and then they probably right away assume that you have a cruiser of some sort. And then if they saw your GS, that would be the second surprise. Whereas if you go to a lot of these events, you don't have to explain yourself. You just tell people what you ride. I would imagine most people, oh yeah, that's great, that's cool. Do you think that's part of it, or?
You know what? I think a lot of people, maybe not in the motorcycle community, maybe just a lot of people like to make their own judgments. And as a motorcycle rider, you can just be who you are, plain, whoever. And I think it's probably part of it is people get me. People get me. I just love being out in nature. I love being on the bike. That's an interesting question. I never really thought about it that way.
Well,
I think
I
so.
often have said at work, so a big thing in Canada, in a lot of cool places, literally, is recreational hockey. So a
I
guy
was
will
a
come
hockey
in,
player.
so a guy will come into work, or he'll be off sick. Oh, what happened to Joe? Oh, he separated his shoulder. He got hit in hockey. He's going to be off for 6 weeks. Oh yeah, that happens. Yeah, hockey. Yeah. But if you come in and say, I'm going to be off for 6 weeks, I separated my shoulder, I fell off my dirt bike. Oh, geez, aren't you a little old for that? What the heck's the difference? We're both doing but it's because they don't get it. The hockey thing they get because they play hockey or have.
And you know what, at least with the motorcycle, you can find a new adventure every single day. The motorcycle, it's unlimited experiences at your fingertips, anytime, any day. We used to have a section in the magazine when I was after I worked for BMW, I worked, as I said, the editor of the RA's magazine. And we'd have a Diamond in Your Backyard section just for the little rides you can invent in a couple hours to half a day in your backyard kind of thing.
Yeah.
So when you can't get on a plane, like right now, or you could always take the bike anytime.
That's a great thing about sports that you can do by yourself. Motorcycling, you can do it in a group or by yourself. If you've got 3 hours to kill, or you've had it with work or life at the moment, I'm going to take off for the next 5 hours and just go somewhere. That can be great. You don't need to gather 15 people together to get this game going. No, I've got, the weather is nice. The heck with building the fence. I'm taking off and I'm going to take a mental break, which is probably, but either one of you, how much do you think that leads to more cycling? Just that mental, get away from it all. I mean, it's getting harder now with the communication devices, because now it's great. You can hook up your cell phone and get your emails and your text the whole time when you're on it.
Or you can turn
people
it
make
off.
that mistake. Exactly.
You can turn it off. One of the guys I'd ride with, whatever, we hooked up our audio devices. And anyway, his first cousin was this famous comedian who was very famous for talking a lot. And so I would joke that didn't fall far from the tree. So sometimes when you're on a motorcycle, and you could be with other people, but you could also be in your head and sort of really just experiencing your surroundings and just go with it. And all of a sudden, I guess the audio would go on if he screamed or if he said something or if he started singing. He'd get in my head and I couldn't turn it off. I'd get out of my head. And so he kept getting in my head. I had to finally turn it off a few times. It's been great. The really cool thing about when I got my first BMW bike, I found out I could go as many miles as I wanted. And I kept testing it and I kept testing it and I kept testing it. So it's another opportunity, not only unlimited adventures, but it also tests your boundaries and the limits and distance. You think, oh, that's far. Oh, that's 5 hours from that's far. No, I go up to Maine for a lobster roll and come back, which would be 6 hours each way. It's really cool. And it's about, again, you hear this from a lot of people who are motorcyclists. It's about the journey, not the destination. But you can really put a lot into that when you have a motorcycle, and you could go anywhere and make it however you'd like. I mean, I'm an iron butt. I'm not planning to do any iron butt rides this year, but it always surprises me. Suddenly have to be in, I don't know, Missouri, and I'm going there overnight kind of thing.
So you've run some iron butt rallies then?
Yes. Well, not rallies. I've had to go to rallies, and I only had a day to get there.
Oh, okay. I see. Yeah.
And like when, I don't know if you went to the Petoskey one, maybe we met at the Petoskey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was at Petoskey.
Rally. Yeah. And that one I did in one day. That was a long ride from New Jersey.
How far would that have been for you?
I think it was a 1,200-mile ride.
Oh, okay.
But I literally got a hotel room in Ohio somewhere to sleep for 3 hours. That was my little break on the 24-hour ride to Petoskey. I only had a day to get there, so I made the most of it. It's fun. But I got there and the sun was setting, and I guess it's so far north, it was about 10 something or 10:30. And I literally was chasing the sun as I was going. It was really cool. And it was so pretty. So pretty.
It's funny how certain bits and places or events or scenes stick in your mind forever and ever and ever.
For sure.
And you can match them, but you never actually trump them. You know, it's not, hey, there's something better around the corner. It's different, but it's not necessarily better. It's interesting to see. Sure. I've never done 1,000-mile day. I've come close. I was 850 miles, and I thought, yeah, I've got to do another 250 miles. That was all on secondary roads. And
I get it.
It was all on secondaries, and so at 850, I thought, well, this is my accomplishment. This is it.
That's a lot longer.
I'm not going to do 1,000 miles. I appreciate the fact that people do, and it's fascinating.
And to be fair, yes, secondary roads are probably not an iron butt kind of riding.
Nope.
That's highway. It's pretty boring, but I get sometimes I learn some languages, but or listen to stories or listen to music or sometimes just nothing and just be in your head. So I do find there is something called, I call it the riding coma. I have to be careful. If I'm riding too long, I have to get off my bike.
Yeah, you start kind of like zone out.
Like touch my fingers, it resensitize everything.
So while we're on this subject of kind of the iron butt kind of ride, what are our thoughts on the mileage awards? Most of the magazines do it. They give out these awards for putting on whatever 10, 20, 30,000 miles. I know what Rob's opinion is, and I have my own. What's your opinion?
I'm curious what you guys. So you got to share your opinion after this. I think it's interesting. It's funny you should ask, because I helped my former boss at BMW revive that with BMW, my high mileage award, and I did a whole article. I guess I wrote it up for them when I was working with BMW, for the origins of the high mileage award with BMW. Probably didn't know this when you asked. But and for a couple rallies, we ended up I got a whole medals placed and everything. I thought it was a neat accomplishment for these people. There's some people who've done 1 million miles. I remember when I first got my bike and I did almost 30,000 miles in the first year on my 1150 GS. I just kept going.
Yeah.
I think you could look at it as some people do the mileage and they don't see the scenery, and some people do less mileage and see more scenery. So it's what you want out of riding. I think it's a cool accomplishment, and I thought it was fun to see the people and give the awards to them and things like that. Does it measure what kind of rider you are? It's a number. I mean, is it, you know, as Rob hasn't done an Iron Butt, but he's done a lot more secondary roads probably than I'll ever be able to compete with. He's probably seen more backwoods scenery. Not that I haven't tried to see those, but unfortunately, long distance riding, you're not in it for the scenery as much because you maybe have to get to a place.
And that's a problem in North America, that we have big distances. So exactly, you want to make that rally or that whatever event. Often it's a couple days away. I used to go to Elkhart Lake all the time to see the superbike races, and you almost can't help but do a lot of interstate because you have to go. Well, you're going around the lake and then down. Even with hitting a bunch of interstate, it's still 10 hours because over 600 miles, I think.
Yeah.
And I would try and hit some back roads along the way, but either way, I think if you hit the back roads, it was 10 hours. If I did a bunch of interstate, it'd be 9. Either way, it's a long day, and you want to kind of get there before dark because you're in major deer country, and so you want to avoid that problem.
Get it.
So what do you think, Robbie?
Well, and I was going to say with that, actually, California, I tried to go from LA to San Francisco thinking it'd be a short distance. And I figured I'd take the back roads. It took forever. So when on the way back, I had to get on the 405, and literally I had just gone, I was at the launch for the 9T, BMW's Cafe Racer, no fairing, anything, but I almost bought a fairing for it because it was so much. I had to duck for that, just straight the wind all the way. It was too much.
Well, yeah,
Sorry,
I know around Elkhart, it's at the very first part when you're leaving the racetrack, you're hitting community after community. So you just hit 50 miles an hour for a minute, it seems. Then, okay, you're into the next community and you're thinking, okay, like I've got 9 hours of riding on me to go. Yeah, can we hit some type of back road highway?
The thing that's always twisted me up about the mileage contest is that there is no similar event for people who don't ride on interstates. And I go back a zillion years. My career started riding around behind my father with 70-some thousand miles on the back of motorcycles. And we were often on the highway, but that was in the 70s, early 70s. So things were a little different then. The highways were there, but the secondary roads weren't nearly as crowded as they are now. I had a lot of nice experiences there. But one of the fellows who's been on tour with us a number of times, a fellow named John Herman, who just celebrated his 90th birthday. He still has 1200R in the garage. I don't know if he's still riding, but if he isn't, it's only very recently that he quit. But he's got a 1,000,000-mile award. He's a friend of the mark. He's been on tour with us 26 times. John rode every single day. And it wasn't a commute to go get coffee. It was he'd get on the motorcycle and ride it for 2 or 3 or 6 or 8 or 10 hours every single day. He had the advantage of living in San Diego and Coronado, wonderful weather, and it was generally wonderful weather, so off he'd go.
I think I met him.
I'm sure you have. I'm sure you have. So here's a guy that is as enthusiastic as any motorcyclist in the entire country. And at best, he was going to come up with an average motorcyclist award because of mileage. I'm riding basically for 6 months a year, at least half of that 6 months, 3 months solid on the motorcycle. And I'm doing it on secondary roads. And I'm covering, if it's really a big year with a lot of miles, 30,000 miles at 30 miles an hour. And I'm going 30 miles an hour because of the necessity of traveling at that speed. As you well know, Jane, you get up onto the roads and you're working really hard to go 30 miles an hour in places.
Oh, yes. Oh, my gosh.
So my average speed is 30 miles an hour for the entire summer. And fascinating, when we had some events going on in Paris, and I had to make it from Munich to Paris and did so in a day on the Autobahn at 135 miles an hour all the way there and back. It didn't change my average at all. It actually didn't. And that was 3 trips back and forth to Paris, actually. But in any event, my gripe is that there is not a comparable event for people who want to ride their bikes with enthusiasm, but don't want to ride them on the highway. And I've thought and thought and thought about how to make it happen, whether it's with hours. I mean, that's what a ship is measured in, is hours of use. And your trucks, too, probably have an hour meter on them for the generators and for some of the big pumps and things. And the fact that John Herman is on his bike for 8 hours a day on secondary roads, in my opinion, shows me that he's a more enthusiastic rider than the guy that simply gets on the highway and puts a cruise control on and does circuits around Chicago to get the extra 7,000 miles in to put him on top of the list. And I'm not knocking anybody who does that, but there's just no alternative. And that's my biggest gripe about the mileage thing.
Well, and also to your point, technically, the person who goes on the secondary road is actually mastering the techniques of riding more so than if you're on the highway on cruise control. But you know what I have to say, though, riding on the highway is, I mean, and riding in general, but you're hitting that wind for so long, it does take a toll on you. You feel fatigued. Oh, yeah. You're definitely building muscles, but that's an interesting take on this. I didn't even think about that, though.
Well, I've wrestled with it for a long, long time, and I've not come up with anything that I could package together in a suitable way to suggest it to either corporate or to any of the clubs. There's still some holes in how to do a contest like that. I don't think that people are inherently cheaters. I think people are inherently honest, but not always. And I couldn't come up with anything that was quite as verifiable as odometers, unfortunately.
Yeah.
You know, you can always put your GPS in the car and do laps of Chicago on the secondary roads.
You're right. It's too bad you can't have the time meter hooked to your bike and somehow when the engine's running, it starts the time. But
that was one of the suggestions. Yeah, we talked. I mean, I've because this has been bugging me since I was 30 years old, and I looked at John and I thought, man, this, you know, here's somebody, and these are people I know because we were very, very active in the BMW MOA forever, and there were people that were getting high mileage awards who fair dinkum rode a lot. They really did. But here, on the other hand, is somebody else I know who's riding comparable hours up and down Palomar and all through the mountains and up to Idlewild and up the coast and hither and yon and going through motorcycles like mad, going through tires, going through brakes, and going through motorcycles.
Of course.
Yeah, you would be, yeah.
That kind of investment was certainly similar to anything that anybody on the high mileage stuff was doing.
Definitely dedication.
Yeah, and enthusiasm, and yep.
It's always nice to hear the stories about these people who are so dedicated riders, whether or not they win the high mileage award. Because John, if it's the same person, but I think I met him, he's character, and that's awesome. And he's filled with this enthusiasm for riding.
Yes, absolutely. Very much so. He is an inspiration to many people.
So it's not a huge community. It's at North America. It's funny you're talking about this one guy. You both have heard of him and possibly met him. In all of America, you know, we don't. There's not a ton of people that we're talking about.
You know, the motorcycle community is small. Especially if you're talking to one demographic. I know the BMW crew of that demographic, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I have a cool story. I met this guy once. He was 95. Totally with it. He had just finished the Motorcycle Safety Foundation course. He was going to get a bike and he's trying to figure out what bike. And he came to me and I was working one of the motorcycle shows. He wanted to go riding with his nephew who had an LT, like a big touring bike. He had more energy than, I don't know. I was just awed by his enthusiasm and energy. And he said, "Tim, I'm gonna ride a motorcycle before I go." Anyway, if you have the aptitude and the strength and you're able to do it, good for you.
Yep.
I think Rob's one comment when I was interviewing you, when you would maybe retire, you said when you could no longer ride.
Yeah. And then it's time just to
put your leg over the bike.
Yeah. One last time, Mikey, lift my leg over the bike. There's a cliff over there. I'm going to go see what's on the other side. Yeah, and it's interesting that the thing that keeps popping up, I know for me, and I think that both of you are probably thinking the same thing about just how good it is to clear your head and get out and ride. You know, Mike, as a firefighter, is in a job that can be incredibly stressful at times, when he's not sitting around with his feet up and waiting for something to happen. When things are happening, they're happening. What happened before is sticking with you until you get it out of your head or get things right with it. So it's great for all of us to be able to get out and actually ride and play around. And it's important that we push others to do that. It's really easy to be afraid to be, the hardest step is the first one out of the chair, isn't it?
Yeah.
Once you put the pants on and the jacket on, it's, well, I've got all this dumb gear on. I may as well go for a ride. Can't really get out of it. Hey, it's raining. Oh, I still have all this dumb gear on. Let's go for a ride. And then
refreshing.
When it's all said and done, it's refreshing. You come back and it's not, I shouldn't have done that. It's, I'm glad I did that.
I took a friend out on dirt biking a few weeks ago. He had a little bit of experience dirt biking. I thought he had more than what he did. But so we did some trails, some easy stuff at first, and then we got to a point where, well, I think you'll be capable of this, and and he was. But when we were done, it's funny, he said half the time I was just shit scared, thinking, "Oh my God, like what am I doing?" But he said when I was done, he thought to himself, "I did that. I accomplished that. Wow!" Like I kept having to remind him, relax, look where you want to go, relax on the bars. Remember that bike is far better than you are. And so just relax and just do your thing. And he said he tried to remember that all the time. And at the end of the day, he was so pumped. He said, the stuff we rode over today, if you kind of gave me a choice, I'd say, no way, I can't do that. But he said the bike just went over it, and I felt it was so invigorating. Like, wow, we did that. Last
November, I was out at a school, and then I went through the Mojave Desert. And I've never ridden the 1250 GS. And that was really cool, I have to say. And it's about trusting your bike too. And you know that bike has such capability, and you see these people. And frankly, if there wasn't someone in front of me riding up this rock face, I might not have followed them, you know. But it was cool. It was very stressful. And that's how I've sort of played in this game, I guess, if you want to say, or I've been able to actually work in this industry now since 2002. It's just been a really fun time. Not the best money maker, but I can't say that many people have had the life I have, as far as being able to, someone paying me to go ride my motorcycle. That's pretty awesome. Yeah. And being able to do it a lot of different places, and taking the adventure outside your back door, or South Africa, or wherever, frankly, you know, you can take it a lot of places.
You were saying about having that rider in front of you. Isn't it amazing having just somebody going in front of you if you're unsure of the ground or the corner or the whatever, and just having that rider in front of you, you watching him go through and think, okay, well, he did it. And as long as you have confidence in your ability, yeah, it's like, okay, well, I think got this. And that confidence transcends, is that the right term? I don't know, but all of a sudden you pick up the confidence. Okay, I think I can do this, and a lot of times you can.
Right, and don't think about it too much. That's where that's the worst part. If I had seen this set up ahead of time, I would be like, no freaking way, you guys can do that. I'll see you on the highway. I'll go to the lunch stop, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I try to remind people all the time. I say, at speed, if you're on that bike and you just jump off the bike will probably go over that thing by itself. You're actually, if the bike had a pick, it would say, get off me. I'm good on my own. So if you think of it that way, just try and let the bike do its thing, and it'll probably work out fine.
It's interesting, though. One of the things that, from the standpoint of riding, one of the things that I just noticed as we're all talking is that we used terms like helps clear the head, helps refocus things, etc. But we never really said it's relaxing. And quite the contrary, when we're talking about the off-road riding, when we're talking about the new experiences, and I don't find motorcycling to be particularly relaxing when I'm doing it in the way that I like to do it. I like to have a challenge. I like to have to work hard. I like to have to be very focused on what I'm doing. And I like to have challenges that are such that when I'm done with them, I know I've got an obvious, you did a good job. because you couldn't have done that had you not been on the ball. And you're saying the same thing about being out in the Mojave with Rawhide. They do they've got a really, really good program out there. He's got some great places to ride.
For sure.
Jim's
and
got a
more
good thing
sand. More sand than I've seen except for South Jersey. Oh my gosh. I don't get to ride in a lot of sand, but that whole time it was all sand. A new experience in that respect. But it's amazing. The bikes will get you through. Everybody's really cool, you know, they stop, they help you, you know, Rawhide, but it's a great program. And I had never been able to get out there because I'm on the other coast. But it was a great opportunity. It was a great opportunity. I also was thinking, from an age perspective, whoa, what am I still doing this stuff for? Right?
Because you can.
Yes.
Because you can.
And you know what? There's a certain amount of relaxing after it. Look, I accomplished this. Wow. You know, after the adrenaline comes down, you feel really relaxed and it was a great experience. Yeah,
it leads to relaxation, but it's not relax. My point, I guess, is if you're riding around and you're relaxing while you're riding, you're not riding.
You have to be on the ball, on point all the time, even on the highway.
Yeah, in my opinion, yes.
Yeah, you know, I've never thought of it that way, Rob. I think you really have something there, almost like any other sport. I play squash, and I love at the end of it, like you said, that's not relaxing. You're running your butt off, and it's a very mental game and everything else. But at the end of it, hopefully you feel good because I've won some games, not always, but like you said with the motorcycling, same thing. If you've hit that tricky pass or on the dirt bike, you're really rough terrain. At the end of the day, I'm covered in sweat and I'm exhausted. My thighs are burning. But wow, yeah, that was so great. That wasn't relaxing, but now. Yeah, you're burning off that energy.
And that's a feeling that a whole lot of people never, ever, ever experience.
It's a shame. I was in the best shape of my life when I was riding all the AMA things. It really is full core workout because you're steering with your whole body. People don't see it as much of as athleticism, but there's quite an athleticism to riding too.
Oh, yes.
For sure. That's when I took my friend out dirt biking. Whatever we were talking about, before we left, we were talking about what to wear and stuff. I said, keep in mind, I said, this is exercise. I said, this isn't fun time, what we're going to be riding over. I said, you will be tired the next day. Your legs will be sore, I guarantee you. And even though he was riding fairly slow still at the end of the day, because he was probably more tense than most, he was a lot more tense than I was, but still he said, his legs were totally burnt out the next day, his thighs and everything else, because the train and everything were going on. Yeah, it's a sport like any other sport, and the harder you play it, the more tired you will be.
But also you get the muscles too. I mean, your friend doesn't have the riding muscles and the riding memory muscles that you might have.
For sure, yeah.
I never thought this graduating from college with an economics and languages degree that I would be riding motorcycles for a living.
Well, you just hadn't learned that language at that point. Now you know it. Now you speak it well.
Despite my parents' best intentions. You know what? I always joke, they still don't want me to be on a motorcycle, but they've come to terms with it in some respects, you know?
So you're stepping back a little bit from professional involvement with the motorcycle industry. What are you up to now?
Now I've decided that after I was the editor of a magazine and my writing, which was my hobby and then became my career, suffered, I'm now back to be my hobby. And I've always really liked helping people, but I used to help them into a motorcycle. And I thought that was, therapeutic. People are happier when they're riding, in my opinion. I like to help people more on a more permanent basis and maybe from the ground up, from a more holistic perspective. So I am looking at and been studying towards different degrees in functional medicine and nutrition and maybe some psychology, and just sort of look for a whole holistic perspective of helping people. A lot of people come to me for different things, and I'm advocate for different things, and I'm founded different organizations and I'm president of. And so people have already come to me in that for special ed, for fortunately divorce or other issues, things like that. And people come to me and they find me, and all free stuff. but maybe if I get my degrees in this and I can help people and then actually earn a living with it too, and maybe keep my hobby on the side there.
And can you imagine not riding?
No. And you know what? I tried. I had an accident, as many, people have in the motorcycle industry, but you know what? I wear full gear, and I thought about not riding anymore. And I could tell you there was a lot of pressure from my family not to ride anymore. And I realized at one point, and also they had roped me into being the editor of the magazine, BMW magazine for RA. How can you be the editor and not ride? But I also realized that there was something missing out of my life, and that was riding. That freedom, I don't know what to explain, but how to explain it, but it was definitely an integral part of my life, and I needed it in my life to sort of keep the sanity, or I don't know. It also, I don't know, you know, when you're riding, you also feel sort of badassy kind of thing.
Yeah.
If you could say that, you're like, don't mess with me today. I'm on my bike.
Yeah. There's truth to that.
The brave may not live forever, but the cautious never live at all. That's sort of, I found that quoted by someone. I think that really says a lot about our lives as motorcyclists. You know, you take that step out of the chair, as you were saying, get on the bike for the adventure, and you never know what's going to happen. But you take that chance and discover new things, and you really live on a bike. You're able to find a whole different world, many, many different worlds, you know?
There's a big difference between just merely survival and living. Yeah, for sure. I heard a comedian say one time about Steve Irwin, the crocodile hunter. He had this bit about him, and he goes on about how people were really sad when Steve Irwin died. Of course, it's a terrible thing, but he said, keep in mind, he was a crocodile hunter. He wasn't a pigeon hunter. Like, he was a crocodile. How long do you think a crocodile hunter is going to live? He was doing extremely dangerous things. Like, he's probably lucky he lived as long as he did.
For sure. He had a very bizarre, anyway, but
yeah.
I mean, he did crazy things.
He did really crazy things.
I always tell people that I want to live my life. I'm not going to do crazy, like, jump off the Empire State Building, but I am also not going to sit at home all day. And so I'd rather live my life in the way I can and be able to have some freedoms and experiences that I would never have if I didn't take those risks, you know?
For sure. There's a balance there. You're doing something, it's a little bit more dangerous than some stuff. There's lots of dangerous things out there. But you're taking reasonable precautions. You wear whatever gear. You have very good training. You have lots of experience. So whatever. I mean, look, what was I think the racer John Cornwell. I think it was him who he had crashed on a racetrack and broken his leg. And while he was recuperating at home, fell down a flight of stairs and ended up dying. So
wow, he hated. He races motorcycles, and then he was on a little bicycle in Italy. You know. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but you know what? He lives too, though. He loved that, right?
One of the for sure things in life, ain't nobody gets out of this alive.
The only for sure things are taxes and whatever. Death and taxes. Exactly. But anyway, without a morbid note, no kidding.
So we've wound up this podcast quite nicely. We started with the bathroom habits. And now we got the graveyard stuff going. This is good.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine? I know, Rob, we were talking about you not riding when you could no longer literally get your leg over the bike. How about you, Mike?
I remember I've high-sided a lot of motorcycles. I'm quite good at it. But I was on a racetrack, get high-sided off, and I broke some ribs and partially collapsed a lung. And I remember when I stopped skidding, I thought, just, my God, like, I'm really getting tired of this because I'm getting older. I'm not bouncing so well anymore. But you're in pain. And then afterwards, like, no, I'm still good. And just, you love it so much, but every so often it bites you and you just try and learn from it and move on. And still riding, that was probably 20 years ago. I haven't high-side. No, I did high-side one about 10 years ago. Ice racing, it threw me off and separated shoulder
oh, wow.
again. But I always said I'm an adult, so I don't dress up for Halloween. But if I ever go to a party or something, I said I'm going to go as every injury I've ever had, so broken legs, separate shoulders,
Oh, wow.
and I have a note on my chest, everything I've had. There's people who've had far worse stuff than me. My only claim to fame is I've never spent a night in a hospital. I'm always
Wow.
they always boot me out. So.
You're always outpatient, eh?
Yeah.
Well,
Okay,
that's
you're
good.
good enough. Go home.
That's good. And it sounds like your high siding skill is getting, you're losing that, luckily.
Yeah, for sure. It's been a while, knock on wood. So
That's one to lose. You don't need that skill.
the last time I did it, wasn't even before. It was because of just a very aggressive rider. A little bit maybe on the crazy side, but the last time I was merely warming up and just hit some snow. When you're ice racing, snow is your enemy. Ice is really good, and I was just warming up. I was taking it super easy, and maybe that was part of the problem. I wasn't focused, and it bit me. And the only thing harder than landing on the pavement is about a foot of ice.
And that's one thing, actually, Mike, you make a really good point, though. That's one thing about riding. Sometimes you feel like you have these off days. That's when you don't get on the bike. You need to be on, and it's not relaxing because you have to be even more mentally focused than you do in a car.
I've known many friends who have had different collisions, or they've come off the bike, and a lot of times they weren't going that fast or anything. It's a bit of a misnomer because it's pounded into our heads from police forces, speed kills, all this other nonsense, when really that's not what a lot of collisions are about. And I can speak that from a firefighting point of view, is that the collisions we go to, the most popular time for a collision is 3:00 in the afternoon on a sunny day. People aren't paying attention. They go through a red light because they're zoned out, and boom. And I've known
in the cars.
Yeah. And I've known
motorcyclists get a bad rap. But,
and I've known more than a few friends who've had different things happen, and same thing. I was thinking about whatever. Next thing I knew, the front end had slipped out on me, and boom, I was on the ground. They weren't prepared at all. Maybe they couldn't have saved it either way. Well, you never know, but the thought often is, oh, he was probably giving her around this corner or something. No. Often that's not the case. There's a retired guy at work. His son was in a bad collision last year. Someone blew a stop sign, wasn't paying attention, and bad time, he hit him up over the car and everything. Had a sport bike. So right away, the first thought is, I bet you his son was giving her on that bike or flying down the road. No, he was actually doing the speed limit or a little bit below. But when a car comes through a stop sign at you, man, you don't have a lot of hope.
You don't expect it either. Yeah.
No, and he was an inexperienced rider. If he had some more experience, maybe he would have seen it. But it was in a residential area, and there's not huge sight lines, as you know. There's houses closer by and stuff. You probably couldn't have, just one of those things.
Well, that was my major one. I was 25 miles an hour full gear, 11:30 on a sunny day in May. But someone ran a stop sign. Yeah. What do you do with that?
Yeah.
And that's I think a lot of the motorcyclists get a bad rap, but it's in the end, I think it's the cars sometimes are most of the time, I would like to think. But that's the statistic I had heard, are the people not paying attention.
Most of the bad accidents we go to, it's exactly that. And it's now that you say that, I've had more than a few conversations with people, and they say motorcycles, they're dangerous, whatever. And I say, I think you're looking at this wrong. When was the last time a motorcycle hit a pedestrian and killed them? I'm not saying it never happens, but it's pretty rare, right? So I think you're looking at this backwards. That car hit that motorcyclist. It's not the motorcycle that's dangerous. It's the bloody car, because he was fine right up until the car hit him, ran him over.
Exactly. But we can be safe, and we can do what we can to protect, mitigate as much as possible, right? We're still here.
Yeah, for sure. You do your best, but it's a way of looking at it. We don't say, geez, being a pedestrian is really dangerous. No. I think you're looking at this wrong. As long as the car doesn't run you over, you're in good shape.
That's an interesting perspective.
Mike is full of interesting perspectives. That's what happens when you live up there around the 45th parallel.
A lot of time to think about them.
Lots of time, man.
We've spent lots and lots and lots of time talking to you. I really appreciate you coming along, Jane, and giving us insight into where you've been and what's going on, and maybe where you're going. Good
I've
stuff.
had a lot of fun. Thank you so much for inviting me.
It was our pleasure.
Definitely. That's it from the Great White North, man. Me and my loon are out of here.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to sign off here and leave you with a little taste of nothing.
Bye.